I'm sitting here with Nick Moss from Chicago, and this is Mark Hummel's Harmonica Party. And we're on the road in Seattle right now, and me and Nick go way back to, I want to say, did I meet you when you were playing with Jimmy Rogers, or was it?
I'm sure you had mentioned that you saw me play with Jimmy at some point.
Well, I sat in with you guys.
That's right. Yeah, you did.
Yeah, but I've known Nick, and I've seen him make a career out of the blues, and he's played with so many great people, and he's one of the he is a youngster compared to me. I'll put it that way. But he's an Alligator recording artist, and he is now, how many blues awards have you won?
A whopping, I don't know, wait. That's
4 or something?
3, 4, 5 now.
5, yeah. So that's pretty good, man.
After 27 nominations, I got my first award.
That's amazing, man.
Me and Jimmy Bott used to laugh about being the Susan Lucci of the blues. But he, I think he got his award before me. In fact, I know he did because I was overseas and I called him and congratulated him. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, one of the things I got to say is that I've watched you kind of rise up in the blues ranks, and I see a lot of it is that you kind of laid a certain foundation for what you do. By the way, Nick is a guitar player, songwriter, singer, and band leader, and you started your own label, as I recall, fairly early on.
I did.
Right? Blue Bella.
Yeah, with my wife Kate, with her help, because I couldn't get anyone else to do anything.
Sign you, yeah.
I was like, I played with the old guys first, and I thought, oh, that's my ticket in, but you find out like nobody cares about the side guys.
Right.
And
right.
I sent my first recording out to all the labels like Blind Pig and Rounder and Blacktop and Alligator and whatever was around at that time, and they're like, "Who are you?" Oh, I just got off the road with Jimmy Rogers and Legendary Blues Band and Jimmy Dawkins. I'm like, "Yeah, don't know who you are."
Yeah.
And so, so I had to do something.
You had to start somewhere. Yeah. Now, did you do your own booking as well?
At the very beginning, for sure.
Yeah.
I did a lot of my own booking. Kate helped a lot with that, at that time. So it was all from the ground floor on up, and we kind of learned as we went on how to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that seems like a really, the way I've always looked at that is that's a great way to kind of get a real grip on how the music business works, and kind of building something with a solid foundation.
Yeah. A lot of, and you need a lot of help. You need a lot of help from friends like you and all. I had musician buddies all over the country, and that's kind of, I'd call them, "Hey man, where's a place to play?
Right.
Can I get some a recommendation and stuff?" Some promoters actually that were really cool. Like one of the first guys, remember Kevin Garrity at Brendan's in Denver?
Yes.
Kevin was a great guy. Still, I really respect him, and I have a lot of feeling for Kevin because he was the first guy to give me a tour outside of the Midwest.
Right.
I called him. I said, "Hey, man, you think I could come play at Brendan's?" And he's like, "Oh, absolutely." He goes, "You want to work some more up along the Front Range?" And I was like, "Yeah, but I don't know any." He goes, "I know everyone." And he booked me like a 2-week tour, or he gave me all the contacts and made all the calls to say, "You need to get this guy in your room."
Yeah.
Booked me like a 2-week tour, all up along the Front Range.
Right.
So it was like a lot of stuff like that, making contacts and networking and,
I had the work. I had the same thing. There was a guy at the Zephyr in Salt Lake, and he was the very first guy to kind of go, "Hey, if you guys are great, if you want, I can give you all kinds of contacts."
That's cool.
And he gave me, a list of about 10 or 15 places, and that really started my touring.
Yeah. Yeah, and John Paul in Salt Lake City at the Dead Goat.
Oh, right.
That guy was great too. That guy helped out a lot too.
I remember that guy. Yeah. So I mean, the thing is, I mean, I know from just, knowing you for a while that, like me, you've been through a lot of band members, but you've had people that you've stayed friends with in that long list, Jerry Hunt and Piano Willie and Brill House Chuck was in your band for a while. A number of Kenny Smith, I guess.
Yeah, Kenny was in and out a little bit in the beginning.
Right. Well, let's talk also about just, your start in the early days. Like, how did you hook up with guys like Dawkins or Jimmy Rogers, Willie Smith? How did you meet those guys?
Well, my brother Joe, was like kind of he was the prodigy in our family. Like that guy, my brother picked up a guitar and could play. Like I know I'm not going to say he didn't put in the work, but he did. He could play immediately and like progressed at a very fast rate. And I used to watch my brother and I was like, man, I want to do that. And so every time he would leave, I'd go sneak in his room and grab his guitar.
Right.
And, of course he figured it out when the guitar was out of tune every time he'd take it out of the box. And so instead of being an a-hole about it, he went and bought me a bass and an amp at a garage sale, an old Silvertone dolphin nose bass, and was the Silvertone with the head slid into the cabinet, but it was the bass version. But for like $7 at a garage sale. And came home one day, he says, hey, if you want to play this, because I don't want you to touch my guitar anymore. So man, I started out doing that, and we eventually, kind of like mutually agreed on, practice schedules, and I would get to sit in with him and his friends, the older guys, so that was cool for me. And then after high school, I had some medical complications, and which I didn't end up going to college. I was supposed to go on for a sporting scholarship. But music was my thing. In fact, I saw Little Charlie and the Nightcats straight out of the hospital. They had like their first tour in Chicago on their very first album. They were playing at Wise Fool's Pub right across the street from Children's Memorial Hospital, which I had just had major reconstructive kidney surgery at.
Wow.
And my brother took me in there. I was like 18. He snuck me in. And I saw those guys playing. That changed my whole life. I was like, well, if I'm not going to play sports and go to college, I want to do this. And I'd already been playing music, but I never really looked at it as a career. Plus, the weird thing was, Eric Clapton was out there and Stevie Ray Vaughan was out there, and I was fans of those guys and ZZ Top, like blues-based rock.
Right.
But I had never seen guys play traditional blues that were white. Like I didn't even know that was the thing. Like you could be white and play blues like the blues on my mom's records.
Right.
That was it just never occurred to me.
Yeah.
I thought like Stevie Ray Vaughan and Clap, that was just rock. And they called it blues, but it was rock. And so that like kind of opened my mind. And then from then on, I just took it from there. My brother and I would go to these blues jams in Chicago. And back then, you could go like 7 nights a week. There was blues jams almost 7 nights a week back then. And started meeting people. And the first guy that I met, and I started as a bass player, was Melvin Smith. He played with Coco Taylor for all his years and played with so many greats. And he was so cool. And he's like, man, you're all right. You can do... And he would show me some things in between the sets and stuff, And he was the guy that got me my first 2 gigs.
Wow.
He got me the gig with Jimmy Dawkins. After about a year of these jams, I was like 18. And said, hey, man, I think Jimmy Dawkins is looking for a bass player if you're interested. And so gave Jimmy a call, and he put me on the road like the next day. And that lasted about maybe a little less than a year. I might have been 19 or just shy of 19. And I really didn't know what I was supposed to be doing.
So were you the only white dude in the band?
I was the only young white kid.
That's a great boot camp.
Right. And it lasted, like I said, like less than a year. I didn't really know what I was doing. And Jimmy had a style of playing that was fairly off the cuff, and if you weren't paying attention and really knew what was happening, it could throw you, which it did.
Yeah.
And he eventually pulled me aside and said, "Well, your heart's in the right place, and I think you'll be something at some point." He said, "But I don't have time to teach you." And I remember leaving that conversation and going back to my pad, thinking, "Man, I'm never going to let that happen to me again. I'm never going to let someone tell me I don't know what I'm doing."
Right.
And I just went to the woodshed so as hard as I could go. I went every night I could go, and I would go see Fuzz play, because Fuzz was still in town, Calvin
Right.
Jones, all the great bass players, Bob Stroger, Willie
yeah.
Black, Willie Kent.
Right.
I would go sit in front of these guys every night and watch them play. And on the breaks, I would just walk up to them. I mean, I didn't know any better.
Right.
Hey, I'm a bass player. Hey, how did you do that? Or what are you doing there? What's that turnaround you're doing? And none of them ever brushed me off to, "Oh man, do this and do
Right.
that," And
Yeah.
like Fuzz, man, he had a way where he would play up the neck instead of across the neck, and that was like a revelation to me too, because everyone always had told me, "Oh man, you got to play behind the beat on this stuff." I didn't really understand what that meant. But I always played across the neck, and Fuzz told me one day, he says, "Well, if you really want to get that feel, man, this kind of makes you naturally play behind the beat when you go up the neck."
Okay,
instead of
that's
across the
interesting.
neck.
That's interesting.
And
Yeah.
and I started learning how to play up the neck instead of
Right.
across the neck,
Right.
and I'm like, that's why that feels better.
That's interesting.
But there's other guys that can play across the neck and play behind the beat, and they've learned how to do it. Well, I can do it now because I learned how to do it up the neck first, and then I can understand how that feels. Then I can do it across the neck.
That's
But
interesting.
at first,
yeah.
I was just rushing everything,
Right.
and so that was like a revelation. But all those guys were cool,
Yeah. Yeah.
and and eventually, Fuzz ended up moving to back home to Senatobia, Mississippi, and again, Melvin
Yeah.
put my name in and said, "Hey man, Willie asked me to go on the road. I can't because I'm out with Coco, man." I told him about you, and Willie put me on the road with him. And I got a call one day, and he's like, "Hey man, I got your phone number from Melvin. I need a bass player." And I was like, "Yeah man, I'm available. When are you leaving?" He said, "Tonight." It was like 2 in the afternoon, and they were leaving at midnight from Willie's house. And the first gig was going to be in New York. They were driving overnight.
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, how long is the tour?" And he said, 13 weeks.
Oh my God.
And I went, and for a split second, I was like, and I looked around my room in my apartment, and I didn't have a lick of clean clothes. I think I had one clean shirt, one pair of pants.
Right.
And I was thinking, I went, "Okay, I can do it." And I just grabbed everything in a garbage bag. And I'm like, "I'll find some place and wash my clothes on the road. I'm not going to lose this opportunity."
Yeah.
And I went on, ended up on the road with Willie. And I remember halfway into the tour, he looked over at me and he said, "Well, you're not exactly Fuzz, but I like what you're doing. I think I'll keep you." And he said, "When we get home, maybe do a little bit more brushing up." And Fuzz hadn't left yet Chicago. He was still in town, and he was playing on Sunday nights with Sunnyland and those guys.
Right.
And so I just went and I sat in front of Fuzz again for a couple more weeks and asked him questions, and he kind of gave me some tips on how to play with Willie. And the next tour that we went out on, I remember the second song of the first night, Willie looked up at me and goes, "Well, I don't know what you did, but you're doing it right now."
Wow.
And it was just, putting in the work.
That's huge, man.
Yeah.
That is huge. Yeah. Well, tell us something about Willie, because I know you guys remained lifelong friends till he passed. Right?
Yo, absolutely, man. Willie was one of the, like you, man, he was one of the guys like us. Willie was one of the hardest self-made guys. He had the opportunities, he played with the guys, but Willie did everything on his own. He started as a harp player.
Right. I knew that. Yeah.
But what made him money was being a drummer. And he's like, I'm not making any money as a harp player.
Right.
So I think I played drums. So he switched to drums, and then he got the gigs with money, and then
Right.
like took care of a family. Booked a lot of his own gigs. Did all the driving everywhere.
Yeah.
I'll tell you. This will explain something about Willie. On a tour going over Grants Pass in the middle of a snowstorm, van breaks down. Fan belt went.
Yeah.
Now Willie is a veteran, so Willie has extra fan belts in the van and a toolbox.
Wow.
Willie gets out of the van, pulled over on the side of the road at 10,000 feet in a snowstorm, a blinding snowstorm, mind you. You can't see like 2 feet in front of you. And it's probably like 10 degrees outside. Climbs under the van and proceeds to start changing this fan belt.
That is friggin' incredible.
I get out, and I'm standing there, and I said, Willie, man, you need anything out of the toolbox? You need anything? And he comes sliding out from underneath the van. He looks up, he goes, what are you doing? I go, I'm here to give you a hand. He looks, he goes, hey, man, ain't no sense in both of us freezing our ass off. Get back in the van.
Wow.
Like, he wouldn't even let me help.
Yeah.
Finished doing what he did, didn't say a word, got back in the van,
Yeah.
started up, we took off.
That's a different generation.
Yeah.
Man.
Used to say, like, guys like that had hair on their knuckles, man. They're just dolls.
Well, the other guy like that was Philip Walker. Was like.
Oh, he was like that too?
Philip Walker I think he even changed a transmission one time on the road. We're all on tour, 3 bands. He changed the transmission the day of a show, showed up at midnight, and the promoter wouldn't let him play. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you try to put it in, man. God. All these guys, man, Willie was like that. He really was. He did all that work and finally got his payday later in life with that Grammy. I was so happy for him.
Yep.
But he was just, man.
And then he passed right after
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Him and Pine Top both.
Yeah.
Just
one of those guys, man. Different, like you said, different generation. I met the first night in a hotel room. I roomed with him very first night, and he's asking me questions about myself. He's trying to get to know me.
Right.
I'm barely 20 years old, I think, at that time.
Right.
He's like, "Oh man, you married?" And I said, "No, I got a girlfriend." He goes, "Oh, you got any kids?" I'm like, "Man, I ain't got no kids." And he says, "Why not?" I said, "Because I go, dude, I'm like 20. I'm not even married. I ain't got no kids." I'm like, "How many kids you got?" He goes, 13. And I went, "What?" He said, 13 kids. And I looked at him and I said, like, how do you even do that? Like, how do you like do that and do this and raise them and all this stuff like this?
Yeah.
And he just looked at me like I was the stupidest dude he'd ever met. He goes, you figure it out and you do it.
Yeah. And he was a beautiful dad.
He was a great dad.
He was he was one of the most amazing parents of any blues person I ever met.
And his wife Lou, she's a sweetheart.
I never met her, but boy, I met all of his kids.
Yeah.
Not all of them, but like he brought 5 of them one time to a gig.
Oh, that's awesome.
In Chicago. Yeah.
I met most of Willie's children. I know he had been married once before and had some kids from his first marriage, but I met most of the kids. Everyone's great,
Yeah.
Kenny worked with me, and I mean, just all of them were great.
Yeah. Well, Willie Smith is a shining example of what every person should aspire to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
He really was. Now, how did you meet Jimmy? How did you meet Jimmy Rogers?
Again, this goes back to like the stuff we were talking about earlier. It's just networking and knowing people, and so at that time. So flash forward a couple of years, I was still in Willie's band, but our guitar player Willie Willie Phillips was leaving the band at that, and Willie Smith, knew that I kind of wanted to play guitar because I had started playing guitar a little bit more. Willie and I would room together. Willie Greason, sorry, trying to split the Willies, and so he would show me stuff at night because I'm like, hey man, how'd you play that on guitar?
Right.
And so every now and then we would switch. He'd let me play his guitar and he'd play bass. And so Willie Smith, eventually, when the other Willie was leaving the band and said, hey, man, you want to be a guitar player anyways. Why don't you switch to guitar and we'll hire a bass player and then you can show them what to do because it'd be easier to do it that way. So that's how I switched over to guitar.
Interesting.
And I was like, okay. And so that lasted about a year and a half. And then Willie had to cut and go to join a Muddy Waters tribute tour. So we were going to be off for like a whole summer.
Right.
And they were going over to Europe. And I think it was like Willie, Fuzz, Pine Top, Jimmy Rogers, Portnoy.
Right.
I think Cotton was even on it at some point. But there was a lot of guys on this tour. And so that summer I was kind of home not doing anything. And do you remember a guy named Dave Clark?
Yeah, of course.
Dave.
Yeah. Sax player and guitar player.
Great. We were doing a gig with, I believe it was with Liz Manville, who was Willie Greason's ex-wife. And we were playing a place at Lachette's Musical Inn, this little German pub in Chicago. And I just remember that during the break, Dave seemed a little down, and I was like, hey, what's up, Dave? Man, you're not, you seem a little, he's like, oh, man. He goes, I got a call to do this tour with Jimmy Rogers, and I can't do it because my son is going to be with me all summer. And he goes, yeah, I want to be with my son, but I'm a little bummed because I'd love to do that tour. And I was like, oh, shit, man, I'd like to do it. And I was playing bass that night. Like, man, I'd love to do that. And Dave goes, oh, yeah, I forget you play guitar, too. He goes, I'll let Jimmy know if he hasn't hired anyone. And so the next morning, it might have been like 8 a.m, I get a phone call, and I answer. I'm like, I got home 4 a.m, probably had been drinking and smoking, and answer the phone call, and I hear this voice go, oh, boy, hey, man, I'm looking for Nick Moss. And I was like, oh, man, who is this? He goes, Jimmy Rogers. And I was like, okay. And I just hung up the phone. I was like, and the phone rang. He goes, hey, this is Jimmy Rogers. And I'm thinking, is this Dave messing with me? I'm like, come on, man. I go, come on, man. You know how early this is? He goes, no, don't hang up, man. This is Jimmy Rogers, man. And I got your phone number from Dave Clark and Willie Smith, and I'm calling to see if you're available. And I woke up immediately. I was like, oh, my God, I'm so sorry. Apparently that Willie had told Jimmy on the tour, because he left early to come back and start his tour.
Right.
And said, hey, my guitar player's sitting at home doing nothing if you want to use him. And I think it had worked out because Jimmy's son had just decided to go out on his own.
Oh, okay.
Jimmy Lane was going to go out and try his hand on his own. And at the same time, Dave Clark left a message for him that morning and said, hey, and so he must have heard Nick Moss from 2 different sources and gave me a call.
Right.
And that's how I got the gig. And I remember showing up at Jimmy's house to load out for that tour. And Madison Slim and Piano Willie are standing there. And Lil Rich Escalas, okay? Remember?
Right. I know Rich.
Right.
Yeah.
And Ted Harvey.
Right.
Well, Slim and Willie know me from playing in the Legendary Blues Band.
Right.
But they know me as a bass player. They don't know me as a guitar player.
Right.
They know me as a bass player. And they'd see me play with Willie many times because they were in the band, And I could see Slim and Willie, and they're just like, and they're not saying shit to me. And all of a sudden, I see Slim walk up to Jimmy and goes, hey, Pop. He goes, I think you made a mistake. And Jimmy's like, ooh, what are you talking about? He goes, you hired 2 bass players. You got Rich and this guy over here. And Jimmy goes, no, that's my guitar player. He's playing guitar on the tour. And then Slim goes, he's not a guitar player. He's a bass player. He goes, oh, no, man, I got a call. He's my guitar player. And he goes, you play guitar, right? And I go, yes, sir. And Slim just goes, oh, man. And he was all upset about it because he'd never heard me play guitar.
Right.
And after like a couple nights of playing guitar, and he goes, oh, okay. I didn't know that he played.
Yeah.
And then he was okay with it. But him and Piano Willie were all very worried that there was 2 bass players and no guitar player.
That's great. Well, maybe he was trying something new.
Yeah, that's right. Like Spinal Tap.
Yeah. So, did you record with Jimmy?
I never got a chance to record it. The only thing that was ever recorded was we did some stuff in London in the BBC studios that I think never got released. But I remember we did like 12 or 14 songs.
Right.
I don't know if they were just released for a radio program. But I've looked and scoured and searched for them, and I can't find them. I've asked friends over there if they could find them. But yeah, I think what happened was, either Jimmy's management at the time refused to get them released, or he has the masters.
Was that Radar?
It was Tom. Yeah. I'm sure it was Tom. Had something to do with it. It was definitely Tom, but who knows what happened on those recordings? That would have been great to have.
Were you on Conan with him that time?
No.
Okay.
I missed that by like 3 months.
Okay. Yeah. And you did record with Willie, though, as I recall.
Yeah. On a couple records.
Yeah. Okay. Was that Blind Pig?
No, the first one was Ichiban.
Okay.
And that was that, I think Money Talks. It was the Money Talks album. I played bass on that one.
Okay.
And then the other one was the Blind Pig with that album with Kim Wilson.
Right, with Kim on it, yeah.
I think Bag Full of Blues. And I play like guitar on like 4 or 5 cuts on that.
Right, right. I remember that. So, what was it that finally inspired? And you were Jimmy for how long exactly?
Just shy of 4 years, I think.
Okay. And that's a good while.
Yeah, and then his son eventually came in the band. I think at that point, I know at that point, Jimmy knew he was sick. He never let on to anyone else that he was sick, but I think he knew how sick he was. And he got his kid back in the band for that last year of touring.
Right.
Which,
Yeah, I think I saw him on that tour, as I recall. And he was not all that well.
No.
Yeah. And so, I'm trying to think of, what was it that, when you left Jimmy, did you immediately start a band, or did you kind of...
Well, I started... I had a
people?
band around town, which was... Well, you remember Mark Fornak and Mike McCurdy.
And they were both in Jimmy's band.
Yeah. And we all kind of like got let go at the same time because Jimmy reformed the band. Jimmy's son kind of put a band together for him.
Okay.
So let's do something. We did, and started booking gigs. And at the same time, Linwood Slim was in town. Linwood Slim had been living in Chicago for a while. He was playing with Dave Spector.
Right.
And then they ended up parting ways. And Slim and I had been friends while he was in town. And so he ended up joining the band with me. And we played all over Chicago. We played a lot of gigs, like 5 nights a week. And we had a home base at this place called the Mad Bar for a while on Damon Avenue. It was a good time, man. And he was the guy that really talked me into recording my very first record and saying, you don't need those guys, do it yourself.
Right. Yeah. Right. You mean labels?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, now that I finally got the camera right. The other thing I was just curious about was the first record on Blue that you did on your own, was that on Blue Bella?
Yeah.
Okay. So were you were with Kate at this point, Kate Moss?
Yeah, we were just... No, actually, I was not. We were just friends at that point.
Okay.
She helped me design the cover and start the label, and she was the one to put a website together for me and got my first email. I don't know how to do any of that stuff. I still don't.
Yeah, well, that's so important to have somebody that can assist you on that and kind of put your career out there. But I mean, you did... God, like 5 records on Blue Bella, is that right?
Oh, more than that.
Really?
Yeah, I think of my own, I believe there's at least 10 or 11.
Wow.
And then we put out records with Jerry Hunt, Bill Lupkin.
Right. And that was you working with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we put out a couple records that were already done that we just put on the label to help. We weren't a traditional label. It was just, I got distribution. We worked out a distribution thing with Burnside Records.
That's pretty good, yeah.
And Bill's been, I still do
Right, he's a good guy.
Yeah. I still have a good relation with those guys.
Yeah.
And Bill and those guys were, they were the ones that really helped, I think, legitimize as a label because they got us into the stores.
Right. Right.
You know,
That's huge.
yeah, and so we were able to do that. So we put out quite a few recordings, and then started getting nominations from the Blues Foundation, and that kind of helped legitimize us. And
Yeah.
you know,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I know that Bruce Iglar from Alligator, I think he had kind of, the story I heard was that he kind of signed you partially because you'd already established yourself with your own label.
Yeah, and you know, throughout the years, even with my own label, throughout the years, I would still send Bruce and those guys something because, you know, as anybody knows, trying to do your own label, it's not
a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, and
Yeah.
I would have loved to have been earlier signed somewhere else. So you know, my wife at eventually ended up getting a job in a PR firm, so she was not able to devote as much time to the label
Right.
as she had been.
Right.
So that was kind of hard. But you know, Bruce was just I think there was one record that we almost ended up signing with, and then at the very last minute we didn't. So there was always kind of like this back and forth thing. I think Bruce was the first guy. Actually, Blind Pig was, and then that didn't happen. I ended up producing a record for Blind Pig on Magic Slim. I did that Midnight Sun album.
All right.
And then after that deal, we were supposed to sign with Blind Pig, and then that didn't happen. So it was kind of like throughout the years, I would still go back to these guys and see if it would happen. But eventually, Bruce liked the idea of me and Dennis working together, and Kid Anderson was a pretty big help because, you know, I had mentioned to Bruce that Dennis and I were going to record,
right,
and then we were going to use Kid to help produce it, and you know, and he loved that idea, and I think that was a big deal for Bruce to sign me. And I will say that one thing about Bruce is, you know, he's very thorough, and when you get your emails from him, there's a lot of information.
To unpack.
But one of the things you talk about, like running a label, and I said, you know, my wife and I had learned as we went, and I was and there's a lot of things happening, but Bruce had me come down to Alligator Records right after I signed to meet the staff. I thought I was going to meet like 4 people. Well, there's like 9 or 10 people sitting around this table, plus another 3 people on speakerphone from all around the country.
Wow.
And I didn't know that there was that many people. And they went around the table, each one introducing themselves and telling what their job duties and descriptions were. And the whole time I'm just thinking as they're going, like, wow, I didn't do that. Oh, we never did that. Like, wait, you're supposed to do that? Like, I was like, man, we really didn't know what we were doing. And it was hilarious because Bruce was like kind of like glowing us up to his staff, going, Nick and his wife, they had this label and they did such a good job on the label. And I'm thinking to myself, apparently not.
Not compared to you guys.
Do any of this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, you know, you've kept a real Chicago area band. I mean, other than Dennis coming into your band, it's been primarily people that live in the city.
Yeah, and then
even though Rodrigo from Brazil moved and started playing bass with you, he moved to Chicago.
Yeah, I've had a few. I've had a few guys, you know, from that weren't 312 area code people, but they were in and around it. And I've always been of the my whole thing is like you got to be around like-minded people,
right?
In the first place,
right?
And or finding the young talent that wants to do what you want to do. You can't train somebody to be something that they don't want.
No.
Even if they're talented. No. You know, you got to find guys that are young and want to do what you want to do, or at least in that same kind of orbit. Otherwise, it's just not going to work, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't mind finding young guys and you know, working with them. And sometimes, you know, it's not great right out of the chute, but if you got patience and you can work with them,
right,
it'll pay off. And all the guys that I've worked with, even the younger guys, I've always, to me, I like showing guys stuff. I don't know it all,
right,
But I like seeing them when they're learning and figuring it out and stuff, because that was me when I was that age.
Right. That's like the
Yeah.
passing it on thing.
Yeah.
It really is. And there's a great thing about the working with the old guys like you're talking about, you know, Fuzz Jones or Bob Stroger, guys like that. And the fact that those guys were so accommodating to younger
Absolutely.
musicians, that I look at it like it's kind of our job to do that.
Absolutely.
To pass it on to younger players.
Jimmy Rogers one night in a van in the middle of the night, we're driving through, and I usually did a lot of the driving as the young guy, and Jimmy always sat in the passenger seat. He never sat in the back, and he never slept. He always made sure whoever was driving stayed awake.
Right.
But
smart.
But it was great for me because I would put in the cassette tapes of the old stuff.
Yeah.
And then I would stop it at a point. I go, "Hey Jimmy, man, on the record, man, you played this, and you don't play that on stage. You want me to play that part?" And sometimes he would nod, and "Nah, man, that's okay. Don't worry about it." And then one time, Mark Fornick and I were, I was driving, and Mark was sitting in the back seat when he was kind of leaning forward, and we were listening to some stuff, and kind of quizzing Jimmy on that old stuff, and Jimmy just leaned forward and turned the stereo off, and he said, "Look, man, that was one moment in time." He goes, that was it. He goes, "We never played it the same way after that." He goes, "Man, why are you worried about this?"
Right.
He goes, "Man, get the feel and get the time right. You ain't got to play it note for note."
Yeah.
He goes, "I'll tell you when you're playing it wrong."
Yeah.
He goes, "And then you won't be in the band anymore."
That's great. Well, he was a fascinating guy to talk to because, I remember asking him when I brought him out one time, I said, "So how much did Leonard Chess really have to do with you guys in the studio and what it sounded like?" He goes, "He didn't have anything to do with it. That was us." Mm-hmm. He goes, "We had that sound when we came in and we developed those songs. We did that. Mm-hmm. He didn't have anything to do with it."
Yeah. Well, he said that obviously those guys had the talent and they could play all this stuff, but he said something very similar to me. He goes, "Man, he pressed start and he pressed stop."
Right.
And he goes, "And every now and then you'd hear some bitching on the microphone."
Right. Yeah. So he was not the genius that people kind of give Leonard Chess credit for in terms of production.
Yeah.
I'm saying production-wise.
I'm sure he knew when there was a mistake or something to stop the recording.
The obvious stuff,
Mm-hmm. Especially those outtakes you hear on some of those records, they're pretty good.
They're really good, and really different sometimes, really different. And what really blew my mind was I heard this one thing of Muddy when Jimmy was in there. It was from a live gig in like 1956 or 57, and you could tell it was right after they had cut these songs like "I Just Want to Make Love to You" and "I'm Ready" and things like that. And it was like the band was so friggin' good.
Yeah,
they were really good live.
Yeah, man. Every time I hear all that stuff in that era, we were talking last night. We're in Seattle, and Kim Field was on the show. Mm-hmm. And Kim and I were talking backstage about those recordings and that era of those guys playing, and the whole style where it sounds like they're just playing over the top of each other. Mm-hmm. But the beauty of it is, and the magic of it is they are playing over the top of each other, but it's a conversation where they're adding something in to the conversation. And to me, I've always described it as like six dudes sitting around a poker table, and they're just talking over each other and across from each other and but it all is making sense,
right?
And that's kind of a hard thing to do for a lot of guys that are, I don't know, like studied musicians. Like when I hear like more students or guys that really like know theory and stuff, it's hard for them to wrap their head around. And one of my biggest peeves of when I hear like newer music is when you put the record on or the CD on or whatever, and you hear the guitar part, and then you hear the drums, and then you hear the bass part, and you hear the keyboard part, and you hear the horns part. But what you don't hear is the song altogether. They're just playing their parts.
Right. There's not the interlocking kind of interwoven thing that those guys got.
Right.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
And and even though it works like in modern recordings and you hear like, oh, they're all just playing their parts and then comes together as the song and it works perfectly, it just sounds so compartmentalized to me. It makes my brain hurt a little.
Right. Well, I think a lot of that has to do with just the fact that the recording techniques are so different now than they were 70 years ago. You know, that was just it was a completely different way of, you know, they literally would be around one mic.
Yeah.
You know.
Absolutely.
5 guys around one mic or 2 mics.
All the old like traditional recordings, especially from that era of the 50s and early 60s and stuff, to me also kind of reminds me of Dixieland jazz.
Right.
Where they're all kind of,
right.
You know, there's so much going on.
It
but
is
it makes
very
sense.
similar. I agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree. Yeah. So just your life on the road. I mean, you've definitely spent most of your life on the road now, right?
Pretty much.
I mean, that's pretty much what you do. Yeah. And you're one of the young guys that's really, or younger guys that's really kind of devoted the same thing, you know, myself and a lot of my generation have done, which is just going out there and working all the time and traveling all the time. And, you know, the whole thing of, we were talking earlier about the interaction between musicians and people knowing each other, but knowing how to work together. What would you say the most important aspects of band members would be in terms of the guys you've hired? What are the qualities that really stand out to you that make that successful?
Well, I've had them all, so like I'm sure you have. And
right.
First of all, the thing that you want in any band, but particularly for me, for traditional, is you want to have someone that wants to play the music that you're playing. You can't force someone that doesn't want to play that kind of music. I've had guys in the band that were killer at what they do, and they could actually pick the stuff up easier, but they didn't want to play it.
Right.
And you could tell, and then that didn't last very long. That was not where their heart was.
Right.
So you got to try and find the guys that really want to do that. They want to play this kind of music. They want to play your kind of music. Curtis actually gave me some great advice one time. He said, you know, the one thing you got to remember is these guys that you hire, they're following your dream. They're following your dream.
That's a good point.
You know,
yeah.
and so you have to have some kind of understanding that they're not there for them a lot of the time, and if you can make it better for them in any way that you can, and even then it might not be great, and they might have to leave the band, but you got to remember it's because they're there following your dream, not their dream.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah, that's a really good
point. Having these guys that really want to be there, and are okay in their position of being, you know, hey, I'm a side guy.
Right.
But I've always been of the opinion that side guys can feel like side guys if you treat them like side guys. But side guys are, to me, the most integral part because I was a side guy.
Right. And you've had that experience of, you know, going to record labels or whatever and them saying, well, I don't know who you are, even though you played with so-and-so. Yeah.
Right. And so, like, I've always been pretty okay with featuring the side guys a lot. Like, in my bands, I've always had guys that I don't mind putting out front and featuring. Right. I don't need to be the center focal point of attention at every show.
Right.
And I always feel like I think it's more interesting for the audience when they see like, oh, when this guy's doing this and this guy's doing that and that guy's doing, rather than the one guy's just doing this.
Right.
You know, one of the guys my brother and I started with in Chicago was a guy named Buddy Scott. He had this band,
Oh,
Buddy
yeah.
Scott and the Rib Tips.
Right.
And he had a lot of great people pass through his band. Michael Coleman, I think Shaka Khan's sister was in his
Wow.
band at some time. Anyways, Buddy would let anybody sit in.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter how good they were. And a lot of them weren't great.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to Buddy one time, I was like, Buddy, man, why you let all these people sit in? I go, that guy's horrible, or that lady's terrible. And Buddy says, well, the way I look at it, he goes, I can't lose. I go, why not? And he goes, well, I let this person sit in and he's great or she's great. And the audience says, man, Buddy's such a great band leader. He's got such a great band. Look at these fine musicians that come out and want to sit in with him. He goes, then if I let this person sit in and they're horrible, then the audience says, look how terrible that guy is. I can't wait till Buddy gets back on the stage. And I was like,
that is great.
Very interesting point.
That is a really interesting point.
Yeah.
Except if they leave.
Right. So like I always kind of took that and I kind of refined it my way, and I said, well, look, I got guys that can actually play and actually are entertaining, can actually do things.
Right.
And I'll put them out front, and I don't have to. Plus, it takes kind of some pressure off me. I don't want to be sitting at the mic all night long.
Right.
And my bands have always been that way, man. I've always had guys that I could throw out front.
Right.
So being on the road is also, and this takes years of experience to learn. And I can freely say I've only been maybe in the last 10 years of being a band leader for over 25 years have I wouldn't even say completely 100% successfully done this, but I've learned how now to really understand how to identify the personality and approach the personality the way it needs to be, because everybody is a different personality.
Right.
And if you treat everyone as the same, you're going to burn someone's ass at some point.
Right.
Some people can take it, some people can't.
So it's kind of identifying strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah,
and putting the strengths out there.
Right.
Yeah.
And just being like, even in the van and in between, not even on the stage, just all the stuff, which is more than being on the stage. To me, it's like 90% of your stuff is everything that happens off the stage is learning how to deal with the personalities in your band and stuff. And, like I said, some people can take certain things, some people can't. Some people mistake things that you say and misconstrue things that you say, and so you got to learn, like, oh man, I gotta say this in a different way. I gotta come at it in a different approach, and things that I would normally say or things that were said to me, I can't turn around and say, like, especially now. And I'm not trying to sound like an old man, but like with the younger guys, there's certain things you just can't say. There's certain ways to act that you just can't. Like in my day, in your day, in the van, if I would have said some of the things that were said to me from some of the guys in my band about the way I was being talked to, they would have just pulled the van over and quietly gotten out and taken my bags out and then said, all right, see you later.
Right.
It's just the way it was.
Yeah.
But now I understand, like, you just got to learn how to be almost, I don't know, like, just be cool and learn how to speak to people. And something that you never really thought you had to do is, like, learn, really thinking about what you're going to say before you say it.
Right. Psychology.
Yeah, psychologist.
Yeah.
And, and there's nothing wrong with that, too. And I feel like actually doing that now, you get a lot more out of
better results.
Better results.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And that does take a long friggin' time.
Hell yeah, it
does. I know that from my own experience, because I've pissed off a lot of musicians over the years, and had a lot of people come and go, as a result of.
I've had to you know, I've had to go back and forth to the guys. I'm like, yeah, I know how that sounded, and that's not exactly the way I meant to say it.
Right.
And I apologize if
Right.
it came off. This is what I meant to say. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes you got to do that, and I feel like there are a lot of people out there that don't do that. They don't even try to backtrack or even you know, they just let it go. You know, I'm like, wow.
And that you lose people like
Absolutely.
that. Yeah,
Absolutely.
you certainly do. Yeah. Well, man, this was great, man.
Yeah,
and I'm happy for your success, Nick. You've always been a huge help in the Chicago area in terms of, I mean, one of the reasons I had wanted to have you on this for a long time was that you were always very helpful when we'd come to Chicago.
Oh man, I'm glad to be on here.
Yeah.
I'm having fun.
Yeah. And
Very cool.
I admire what you do, and it's really cool to watch somebody, you know, younger than me grow the way you've grown as a musician and a band leader and the whole thing, man.
Well, I'm glad I'm younger than you. I'll be right behind you every step of the way. No, I appreciate it too, bud.
Yeah. All right.